Welcome everyone to another episode of Elbows Tight Podcast. It's your host Travis and John. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. We have a wonderful guest today. Who do we have, John?
Chad Kuhn.
Was that a question?
No, out of Ohio. Nice guy, man. For one, I'm jealous of his beard.
Yeah, great beard.
I wish I can grow that and I can't. Two, I always like to hear from someone that's around my age and you know, kind of their story through jiu-jitsu and how they evolved. And it's always awesome to hear how they start, you know, in their 20s and then where they're at now. And I always find that stuff fascinating.
Yeah, Chad is from the Limitless Radio Cast. He's one of the hosts over there, and he is a black belt, first-degree black belt, like John mentioned, over in Ohio. Been training in jiu-jitsu for almost 20 years now, which is crazy to think about. Such a long time. And, yeah, this conversation is great. We kind of go over being an older practitioner, competition, how to approach class as a white belt. What else did we cover, John?
You know, I really like to talk about approaching it as a white belt. I don't think we've really talked about that in a while, and I think a lot of people will get some value out of that. That was probably my favorite part of that recording. It's a big deal, right? And you kind of lose sight of it, especially after you've been doing this for a few years. So it's nice to think about that brand new white belt and what they're going through when they come to class.
Yeah, absolutely. So let us know what you guys think about this conversation with Chad. It was a great one. There were some technical difficulties. So when we first start the conversation, you'll hear us joking about it. His computer did not like our recording software or his phone or his internet, but we ended up getting it all done.
Yeah, it was like the first try. We only got to first base, then second base, and finally we got the whole thing.
Yeah, finally. So don't forget, go check out our merch. elbowstight.com if you want merch. These hats aren't on there, but this sweater is. Also, we have t-shirts, mugs, all kinds of cool stuff. Elbowstight.com for that. Follow us at Elbows Tight everywhere. If you haven't already, our Instagram has been steadily growing, so thank you guys for that. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you haven't already. And yeah, that's pretty much it. John, you got anything else?
Nope. Thank you. Give it a listen.
All right, guys, let us know what you think, and we'll talk to you later. Peace.
Welcome, everyone. This episode of Elbows Tight Podcast is brought to you by Amino Co. Travis, go ahead and tell us about Amino Co.
So I have been using Perform by Amino Co. It is 100% science-backed formula, patented, and it is a great pre-workout and intra-workout. Some of the science behind it is it supports athletic performance by triggering muscle protein synthesis and reducing muscle breakdown during exercise. It improves the mental focus and decreases the feelings of fatigue by providing the optimal balance of neurotransmitter precursors. And then finally, it increases nitric oxide production and promotes energy for sustained peak performance. I've been using this about 30 minutes before my jiu-jitsu classes, and I must say it has been helping me immensely. I feel more focused. I feel more energized. Recovery after class feels much better. I wake up in the morning after and don't feel nearly as beaten up, and it tastes great. I have the pink lemonade right here. I have the blue raspberry coming in. John, where can people at home find this?
You can go to aminoco.com/elbowstight. You can use the code elbowstight. You'll get 30% off. Again, go to aminoco.com/elbowstight. Use the code elbowstight to get 30% off, and you get a free gift with every purchase.
Ooh.
Thank you, Amino Co.
Thank you, guys. Chad, third time's a charm, man. All right, we got it this time. I believe in us.
Oh, man. Figures have another podcast guy on.
I panicked there for a second. He was freezing. I didn't know if you heard you.
Yeah. I said, figures you have another podcast guy on and we can't do anything, right?
Yeah, I know. It's unfortunate. I mean, it happens sometimes. You know, we all run into technical difficulties, but we work past it and we have the conversations, right,
Absolutely.
John?
That's right. Crucial conversation.
Like your video just went out on us, but it's perfectly okay. I think the perks of technology. So
I'm telling you.
But hey, Chad, for the people, yeah, right. For the people that don't know you at home, why don't you go ahead and give us a little history of who you are and how you got into jiu-jitsu and everything?
Yeah. So I'm a black belt, first degree black belt under James Klingerman out of Indiana. Been doing jiu-jitsu. This has been my 19th year this fall. And you know, like most guys my age, I'll be 48 this year. I started back in the 80s doing karate and, you know, did that for a long time. And then when the UFC started surfacing, you know, I wanted to figure out what jiu-jitsu was. So, finally found jiu-jitsu in 2004. So it took a little longer in in Ohio, there wasn't a lot of options, but finally found it and still going.
What was your driving factor to finally jumping into jiu-jitsu?
Well, and it sounds very cliche again for my age and starting when I did, is you saw Hoist Gracie, choking people out wearing these pajamas, and you're like, what the heck is going on? Like, I don't want to say the guys I looked up to, but the guys that did what I did, a striking art like karate, were getting their butts kicked. And it just
Yeah.
it didn't make sense because obviously, we were never taught anything on the ground. It was like, oh, the fight won't get there. You don't have to worry about it. Well, we know that's not true. you know.
Yeah, I think someone did a like a research on all the fights on YouTube, and I think what they found was like 95% of fights on YouTube ended up on the ground. So for people to be like, well, I don't have to worry about going to the ground because I'll just knock them out. It's like, well, if someone closed this distance on you, good luck.
Yeah.
That was my strategy for sure. Just going to knock them out.
Yeah, or I'm just going to hold my breath if they lock in a
I
choke.
want to know if 98% of fights in school end in a headlock. That's
Yeah.
because that's what I always ended
question.
up in, was a headlock.
A headlock?
Yeah.
Yeah, like just sitting in side control, just cranking that can opener.
Yeah, can I just break this neck? I don't know.
So I heard in a interview that you're 6 foot and like 150, 160 pounds.
Yeah, it's about right. Right in there.
So what was it like being? I mean, that's kind of like prime body type for jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? Like obviously you want to be a little bit more like strength and whatnot, but like, man, having the lengthy guys that are like skinny, like we have a guy Keegan in our school, and he's the same thing, man. He's like tall and slender, and it's like perfect for his body. Did you feel like it was very advantageous for your body type?
Not at first. So when I started jiu-jitsu at 29 years old, I weighed 130 pounds. So I've always I've always been really slim and tall. And I didn't wrestle. Like I said, all I did was karate. So at first it was very frustrating because I had nothing. And the gym, I started at East Coast Martial Arts where I still am today, and it was no-gi only. And at that time we did a lot of even standing stuff, clinch stuff, Muay Thai stuff. It was a little more MMA based. We didn't do a lot of striking, but we did that kind of stuff. And until I found doing some gi, that's when I really figured out my length. I started playing some spider guard early on and really figuring out that part of it.
What was your early days as a white belt like? Like what were the your first class? How was that for you?
So I remember my first class. It was no-gi, and I got beat up by this girl, tapped me out, and I'm like, what is happening? And I just had to keep going back. And my coach at the time was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, Mike Broom.
Oh wow!
And I knew he trained in the gi somewhere else. So I started training in the gi with him in this little hillbilly town like 40 minutes south of us. And the guy down there had just got his purple belt. So I trained in his basement for 3 days a week, and then I would go back and forth the East Coast too.
You said you are at the same academy that you started at.
Yeah.
How do you feel about lineage? Because we're at the same academy that we started at.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, lineage to me matters, but then again, it doesn't, because I don't know. I feel like it doesn't really matter who you've come from in today's jiu-jitsu, because we're all like meshed into one big community. There's online stuff that you can do, right? So you don't necessarily need to know exactly where you came from because information is so accessible today.
Right.
Coming from someone that went white to black, do you feel lineage is a little bit more important to you because you've been under the same people the entire time?
Not necessarily. So I've been at the same East Coast, the same gym, but we did have had a couple different affiliates. So I have had some different.
Oh, okay.
I have had some different lineage. So I'm kind of like you. I go back and forth. I think lineage, is more important to others, and having those good coaches and all that stuff. But but maybe not as much as it used to be, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely think nowadays people are way more accepting of, maybe like the Ronins of jiu-jitsu. They have like the BJJ Globetrotters for people that don't
Yeah.
have an affiliate or anything like that.
Right.
So if you go to them, you could literally just travel and you'll get your black belt through the tree of black belts in the Globetrotters things. I think that's really kind of cool too. But same thing with us is we've been through so many.
I think there's so many new people in jiu-jitsu that it kind of had to go that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't a choice, when there was less practitioners, then yeah, it was super important. Everyone knew everyone. They knew who all the big names were, but now everyone's pretty much getting into it. So
yeah, and also lineage was a big thing too, because it was like you can't share the school secrets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
don't go train somewhere else.
Yeah. Did you feel like that was still that way when you started jiu-jitsu back in 2004, right?
Right. No, I think we had it was pretty open where I was at, that I cross-trained at a lot of gyms.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. I almost think cross-training was, even though it was a while ago, sometimes it was more accepted then than now. I don't know why. I feel, it's different depending where you're at, like, lineage is cool. Obviously, knowing where you came from, where your rank came from. I'm all about cross training and all that stuff, but I do think at the same time, loyalty is very important.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a difference between like lineage and loyalty.
For
Like
sure.
I have loyalty to my academy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like because the owner is like one of our best friends, right? And just the way we were brought up in jiu-jitsu, we've had a couple different instructors, affiliates that we've been under, but the like core the core loyalty kind of is with my friends that are there, Cody the owner and whatnot. I feel like that is a little bit more important than who
Yes,
teaches us. You know what I mean? Because instructors can come and go, especially if it's not their school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think loyalty plays probably a big deal for me and you. I mean, I've thought about going train somewhere else. And honestly, it's probably, loyalty came down to my deciding factor. Like, why do I stay where I stay? And that was the decision. I've tried a bunch of different gyms when I travel, so I kind of know how I can learn better. Yeah. And that might not necessarily be where I go now, but the loyalty aspect of it and the friends I have there, that's kind of what keeps me there.
Yeah. How long was East Coast open when you first joined?
So East Coast started as a traditional karate school in 1986. So we've been open since 1986. It was like a Shotokan karate school. And, the guy that started it, Steve Heineman, is a very good, a mentor of mine, a great friend of mine. He actually passed away in 2015, stage 4 cancer. So about 8 months, looking back about 8 months before he passed, I took over running the school day to day for him, like managing and that kind of stuff. So, we've had a pretty big lineage there too, as well as far as just tradition and how long we've been around. I mean, in today's world, especially with pandemic and everything that's going on, to be open since that long is pretty impressive, I feel.
Yeah. Was there how long did the jiu-jitsu side start before you showed up? Because kind of what I'm alluding to is 2004 is a long time ago in jiu-jitsu. Like you mentioned, there's not a whole lot of jiu-jitsu academies. So was it open for jiu-jitsu for a long time before?
No, and I would use the word jiu-jitsu even loosely back then. It was just
struggle cuddles is like,
yeah, man. It was my first class. I got heel hooked.
Oh wow!
And nobody said, I feel, that's one feel like jiu-jitsu has progressed so much in the last 20 years, but I think what's progressed more is how we take care of our people. Like I have the talks when a new person comes in, like if something hurts, tap. If you can't move your feet or hands, say tap, scream. I don't know. I wasn't given any of those guidelines of, hey, and obviously we're not heel hooking people, especially in the gi, but yeah, I remember getting heel hooked pretty vividly.
We just had this conversation before coming in here because I put a reel out there in one of our most recent episodes. It was safety starts and ends with you as a person.
Yeah,
and I got a little bit of feedback from higher level black belts and other people. They're saying like, well, brand new practitioners, it's not necessarily their responsibility to make sure that they're safe because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that situation as a white belt?
Yeah.
You know, if I feel like you should also feel like John's point. If you're feeling like there's just too much going on, then you are 100% able to say, "Hey, hold on a second. I have like this is getting way out of hand."
Right.
But I don't know. There's a lot of ego when it comes to new practitioners who they don't want to feel like they're weak or want to tap.
Well, like Chad said, I remember like when Cody started the school, like they said it the first day. If you feel like you're in danger, you feel like you're going to get hurt, any reason whatsoever, just tap and it stops. So like for me, man, like from the beginning, that was like I never worried really because I was like, I'm just going to tap. Like if I ever felt anything, I was just going to like that would hurt me. I would tap.
Yeah. So I have the same view but a different take. I listened to that episode when you guys were talking about who's it on? Is it on the person or you to protect yourself? So I started teaching at East Coast as like a 2-stripe white belt because my blue belt friend that I mentioned couldn't teach anymore. And we had just started a gi program. We finally got gi and he's like, hey, I got some things to take care of. I talked to Mr. Hyman that I mentioned and you can run the program, and it was like no gi once a week and gi once a week. And, I didn't know much, so I taught what I knew. But I remember Mr. Hyman telling me, hey, if anybody gets hurt, it's your fault. Like you need to have control of the room in a way. Now, fast forward 19 years later, I don't know if I can't say it's 100% the instructor's fault because we all have a voice, right? If you can't do something, if you can't tap or you feel uncomfortable, you can stop or say stop. But I will say like, I feel I have control when I'm in the building teaching. You know what I mean? Even if I'm rolling, I know what's going on. I can feel if something is getting too heated and I will stop it. So that's kind of a different take on it. Again, I don't want to say you can't, people are gonna be like, oh, it's not, you have other things to do, but really it's our job as the instructor to keep people safe. You want those people coming back and not feeling a certain way. And I really took that to heart when he told me like, hey, if it's on your watch, it's your fault, So, and I think it's also the instructor setting the tone, the atmosphere of the whole facility as well. Like we can roll hard at our gym and go and we'll, tap each other back and forth, but very rarely, knock on wood, does somebody get hurt. And you guys could come in, a new person could come in, and I feel pretty comfortable if you rolling with any of my people and not worrying. Now, at the same time, as I say, we're not baking cakes. It's jiu-jitsu. Something can still happen. But I feel pretty confident in the atmosphere that we've created and cultivate that nothing too bad is going to happen.
So do you allow white belts to roll with white belts or do you kind of...
For the most part, there are times where I will, say, hey, don't roll with that white belt yet. Maybe it's a wrestler that is just going to go hard, and we all know that.
A whole different breed. Yeah.
Yeah, just don't believe that white belt.
Right.
How do you have so much cauliflower already?
Right. But, if it's somebody that's small in stature or just, doesn't have that confidence yet, I don't want that taken even more away from them. So I might steer them a different way. Like, hey, go roll with this purple belt. He'll take care of you,
Yeah, I listened to something Joe Rogan said on one of his podcasts, and it kind of changed the way I train a little bit. And he talks about kind of like a 85, 10, 15, or 5 rule. So like 85% of your partners should be people that you're better than. 10% of them should be people that you're equal in skill or maybe slightly better. And then 5% should be people that are way better than you. So the reason that is because on the 85% of your partners, right, typically white belts, people less skilled than you, you're going to be able to practice these techniques and execute them on a resisting opponent with some, most of the time, little to no like effort. Not, I wouldn't say effort, but you know what I mean? Like you're more likely to hit these moves. And the reason you want to roll with more people that are same skill level as you, because then you get that good feedback back and forth, and you can honestly hit if you hit a technique on, like, if I hit a good technique on John, I'm like, all right, I know I hit that because John's pretty dang good too, right?
Yeah.
And then rolling with black belts and stuff like that, you're not going to hit a lot of techniques. It's more just
Not gonna hit
surviving if they let you. When you look at training partners, especially being a little bit older, how do you approach who you roll with and how you roll with them?
So a little differently than I used to, again, getting older. I'm just coming off my first ever jiu-jitsu injury in 18 years. I popped my MCL, sprained my MCL right after Christmas. So I was out for 3 months. It's the longest break I've ever had in my jiu-jitsu career. So it was a little rough. But now coming back, again, it's not 100%. I feel pretty good. I'm rolling every day, teaching almost every day. But I'm picking my partners a little smarter now. I'm going with some higher ranks, smaller white belts, blue belts, that kind of thing. I'm not going with the, brand new 200-pound white belt yet. So.
Has that always been the way you approached training with partners? Have you been? Well, you kind of alluded to it. You're a little bit more selective now, but before the injury, how was it?
Oh, I just roll with.
Looking for
I roll with all my students. So and I've said this too on our podcast and other podcasts, is like, obviously we all want our jiu-jitsu to be good and work on everybody. If you're a black belt, you want to hold that level up. But on a real world situation, I want my jiu-jitsu to work on the 210-pound white belt that just walked in, because if I ever have to use it, that's who I'm probably going to use it against, not another high-ranked jiu-jitsu guy. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes 100% sense. That's why, like, when you see the brand new white belt come in, they have no training whatsoever. You kind of look at it like, yeah, all right, now I could show them the power.
Yeah.
Like, you could be all spazzy as you want, or get all buck wild and crazy, but I'm going to show you the power of jiu-jitsu and how being calm and understanding what's going on is truly superior to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, me and our instructor are pretty much the same age. I think either he's a couple months older or maybe I'm a couple months older. I don't know. But, man, watching him roll with the heavier guys, the younger guys, and then watching me roll with him, I'm like, Jesus, I wish I had his wisdom and skill level so I could use that to negate all their physical attributes, but I most certainly do not. Yeah. Chad, what are your typical classes like? Do you have like a special class? Do you have a special class to onboard new people, or do you just drop them right into class?
I usually drop them right into class. We do have like on Tuesday nights, I have a fundamentals class, which, I mean, honestly, all my classes are pretty fundamental based. I don't get off too much crazy topics. But that Tuesday night class is if they come in, if they call and say, hey, I want to come in and try a class, we do a free class. That's the one I usually bring them into. But really all my classes are pretty fundamentally based. I don't, I have a competition class on Saturdays where we'll get off topic a little bit and drill a little harder, roll a little harder. And then if we want to, the higher ranks want to work something, we, might do that off to the side before or after class. And sometimes I'll throw in some lasso guard or spider guard, but not too often.
Chad, have you developed a sixth sense to just know when someone's going to excel at jiu-jitsu?
I mean, you can tell somebody's got, I guess, the athletic ability, right? We talk a lot about wrestlers. Usually they're the ones that kind of picks things up quick. It's just getting them to not turn the wrestling totally off, but a little bit off. And then some guys just come in that, are just athletes, that maybe didn't wrestle. They played, the big thing right now, I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day, is we used to be worried about the wrestler coming in, right? Now you have guys that played D2 football, D1 football, basketball. They're coming in and wanting to do jiu-jitsu, and they're better athletes than a lot of the wrestlers, right? Like, it's just a totally different beast. But I think what I like even more is the unassuming guy that has no athletic ability, right? That you see start picking up jiu-jitsu, and not just picking up jiu-jitsu, but when he leaves at the end of the night, his head's a little higher. He's walking a little taller. He's got that confidence that jiu-jitsu brings, right? So those are the most fun ones to see.
How long do you think it takes for a new practitioner to develop that confidence within the gentle art of jiu-jitsu?
And I mean, you guys know very well that you get out what you put into jiu-jitsu. So, everybody's going to be a little different. How many nights a week are you training? Are you getting everything out of your class? Are you drilling? Are you, and me and the other black belts at East Coast, we're not drill sergeants. I'm not going to yell at you to drill. You pay good money to come and do these classes, so I assume you want to be there. So I'll have that conversation every now and again, like, guys, you got to drill this stuff, because once we go live, you're going to say, hey, that sweep you showed me doesn't work. Well, I'm glad you're trying it, but ask these questions during that time and drill. So, I've seen improvements in guys in, as little as 3 months, if they're coming a lot and really trying things and getting out there. But probably that 6-month mark is where you probably really start seeing some growth.
I would completely agree with that. I felt like 6 months in is really when, you get like a stripe, maybe two.
Yeah.
And then you really start to understand, like, you're like, man, I could feel a tangible difference in how I roll on the mat. I, do technique.
Yeah.
You start getting a little bit more of that understanding of what your instructor is talking about when he talks about a little bit of the nuances and the theory behind why you do something. I mean, you're nowhere close to being like complete understanding, but you start getting it, because by 6 months you're probably might be revisiting something that you've already done, and you've probably rolled quite a bit and whatnot. So I think that's a really good milestone for people if they're training consistently. If you're training one time every other week, I don't think it's going to be 6 months. But if you're 2-3 times a week consistently, I think at 6 months you're pretty much going to be a completely different person than the day you walked in.
I wish there was I know you said drilling. I feel like one of the things that's a hindrance to that is where to drill at.
Yeah.
I know me and Travis earlier on, man, we went and bought Fuji mats. We tried taping them together. We were trying it in a garage. We would try it, right? But it was not the same. Like, those things would fall apart within being on it in like 2 seconds. And the biggest success we had, I think, is in Japan. They just had a gym that was probably 10 or 12 mats, like full-size mats, like that you would see in your gym. And they were open 24/7 for the most part. So, no, you could just show up and use those mats for whatever you wanted. And that's where we really got to practice and drill. And I don't know of anything like that really anywhere for people that could just go and train and drill.
Yeah, and that's where you got to get the most you can out of that class too. If you don't have those other avenues to try to drill, and we're very open to where guys can come in. So we still run, like, we have a bunch of karate classes too for kids, and we have 4,000 square foot of mats too. So I have a lot of space to where guys can come in early and drill if they want to, away from everybody else. But again, a lot of people don't have those avenues. So you have to take, full advantage of those class times and talking to your instructor and asking those, we always say dumb questions, but you got to ask,
So how do you think a new practitioner, say they're listening to this and they're been training for maybe a month, how do you think they should be approaching their classes to be most beneficial to them?
I mean, the biggest thing is jump ahead a little bit. People, especially new people, and with the streaming services we have now for jiu-jitsu, YouTube, BJJ Fanatics, they're seeing so much more. Like, when I started, I only knew what I was shown, so that's what I worked on. So keeping those guys, and again, I don't want to say don't try new stuff and don't watch stuff, but don't do what you don't know or haven't been shown. So come into class ready. If, I wish I would have took notes back in the day. So, take notes. I have somebody, I told him, like, video everything we teach. I don't care what you video of me teaching. Now you can go back and watch it and ask questions. So I think, they just need to come in with an open mind and really, what are you here for? Obviously we all want to roll. That's the fun part. I'll be the first one to admit drilling sucks. It does. It's just, over and over, you're like, oh, can we do something new? But again, we go back to wrestlers. But I'll ask one of my wrestlers, I'm like, how many single legs have you hit? And they're like, God, I don't even know. How many times have they drilled that move? But that's why they're so good at it.
Video is a good point. We used to video, and I think that's where I had some of the biggest eye openers. Like, man, why did I just lay on my back for 10 minutes and let Travis smash me? Why didn't I just move?
Yeah.
Like, I remember that was the first takeaway from the first video I watched.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think video is a very powerful tool in your toolbox, and I think it opens up that pathway of conversational jujitsu. I think you commented on one of our posts where I talk about just thinking about it, talking with someone can really step your game up a lot. And if you have video that you could show your instructor, like, hey, I was rolling with so and so, I got stuck here. What the hell do I do?
Yeah.
I think that's a very powerful tool. Do you you said you encourage your students to do that?
Yeah.
Does anyone ever take you up on it?
Yeah, we have there's somebody in the class that videos everything, and they put it like on a Google Drive and send the links out to different people that want it, and they can watch anything they want and ask questions, and so it's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to film a lot of our classes. I kind of took a step back because as our audience has grown with the podcast, I felt kind of weird video random classmates. I would always ask them beforehand, like, hey, do you mind if I film this? But people act differently when you do film a role, and in our academy people know that we have a podcast and I put content out and whatnot.
Right.
So I kind of felt bad, like if I'm always putting up video of people in class that just want to be in class.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like so I kind of took a step back from video in our classes because I didn't want people to think like, oh man, Travis just tapped me 15 times. now I'm going to be
a real
now it's going to be on the internet for people to make fun of me because I suck. You know what I mean? Like Chewy talked about that. He put a video out where he's like, I don't necessarily put rolling footage up of me and my students because I don't need a win on the internet. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I think it's like one of those touchy subjects. Like I respect people for wanting to show up and do jiu-jitsu, and the last thing I want to do is be the reason why they stop wanting to roll with me because they know they're going to end up on video. You know what I mean?
I get that. Yeah. I think some of the best things you can do. I had this question back right after the pandemic. I think I had one of my white belts. He's a blue belt now, but he's like, hey, if you were me, what instructional would you buy? So here's my advice to noob. And I'm not, again, get what you can get and take it all in. There's so much out there. But as a white belt, I can recommend what you're watching. But again, we always say you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're missing in the details of those DVDs, right? Or those instructionals. See how old I am? I said DVDs. We don't even get
I was like, I get it. DVDs.
Yeah, cassettes.
Yeah. But what I recommended to him, and that's not just because it's me, do privates with your instructor. He knows your game better than anybody. So to me, it's like, do some privates if you can. And then I always recommend to my guys in watching matches, not instructionals, but actual matches. I think you can learn so much in body movements, and then you start recognizing things like, oh, I remember that Kimura. We did that in class. And then you can see how to get to it, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. In like watching people at the highest level is, you see things, you're like, man, that was super slick. But I'm going to be honest with you, Chad. Watching jiu-jitsu, other people roll jiu-jitsu in a competitive aspect is horribly boring to me. I mean, it is so boring sometimes, man. I'm like, oh my God, that was a 15-minute match for a one advantage win. Like, come on.
and that's,
but there's a lot of knowledge there, but
there is. And that's, we can talk about that. I mean, if you're watching IBJJF stuff, you're going to get that probably, like, unfortunately. But I also think if you watch the right people, no matter if it's gi, no gi, who's number one, if you watch the Rotullo brothers, it's going to be exciting.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So that if you watch, not that obviously he's an awesome grappler, but like Andre Galvao, he's going to play the IBJJF game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you just got to figure out who you want to watch too. Yeah.
Have you ever competed in jiu-jitsu?
I did a little bit when I was a white belt, and then my last time I ever competed was at purple belt. But I did, I've won one match my whole jiu-jitsu career, if you want to call it that. But, and I'm cool with that. I used to be really like, man, and especially getting, when I started coaching more, I'm like, well, I can't go out there and lose, right? I'm the coach. But, then I got to realize I got to listen to myself to what I tell those guys. Hey, it's cool. Just go out there and have fun. But it wasn't for me as much. I like coaching a lot more.
How did you handle that whole, only winning one match? Like, was it a demotivator or was it a motivator? Like, did you ever face that wall? You're like, man, I keep losing. Why do I keep doing this? Maybe I should just stop jiu-jitsu, or how did you
No,
handle all that?
I never thought about stopping jujitsu. I just, maybe this competition thing really isn't for me. And also looking back to when I was training too, it was a lot. We trained, like I said, maybe twice a week. My first, guys, I'm a pretty small guy. I think I weighed, I was 145, and my coach told me to cut to the 135-pound bracket for my first tournament. And I'm like, man, looking back, I would never tell anybody that.
Don't ever cut weight on your first competition. Wow.
Yeah, man. It's like, so yeah, I don't regret any of it. I kind of wish I was younger now to where jiu-jitsu is at our academy, because we have a lot of guys competing. It's, it's just the knowledge is higher now. It's just jiu-jitsu has evolved. So things are a lot different. But, I always tell my guys too, losing a jiu-jitsu match doesn't mean you suck at jiu-jitsu, and it doesn't mean that guy's necessarily better than you. He was better than you that day. So don't let that become a negative impact on you.
Speaking of evolving in jiu-jitsu, you started at 29 years old. Obviously, your athleticism, your physicality was probably way more than you are now. How have you evolved as you have grown in age in jiu-jitsu?
I want to say, actually, I'm probably better now in those avenues.
Oh, really?
Being a little more athletic and knowing my body, and I'm still small, but I'm not a workout guy. I'm not going to go throw a kettlebell around for a half hour.
What?
Said no jiu-jitsu guy ever, right?
You're not going to eat acai and do steroids? Come on, Chad.
Well, that might be different. But, I started doing, like, during the quarantine, 3 years ago now, I started doing push-ups and pull-ups. And that's it. Just not like I would just like do 20 push-ups and then an hour later do 20 push-ups. And then, I did the whole grease in the groove method. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about that, but instead, we get in our head that we have to work out for like an hour, a half an hour. And it's not for a lot of people. It's not for me. I get bored. I don't like it. But what I can do is go do 20 push-ups and 20 pull-ups. And then a half hour later, I can do the same thing. And then I grease the groove through the whole day. And then by the end of the day, you've done 300 push-ups and 100 pull-ups.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of the method I took with that. And I think that helped my jiu-jitsu in the last 3 years, doing those kinds of things. And it helped my frames and my core and just being a little more aggressive when I needed it. But yeah.
Yeah, I recently started working out again too, like I mentioned in the previous episode. I love working out. I wish I could dedicate more time to it like I used to. But I don't think it's the end all be all. I think with how much you mentioned earlier, how much information is out there, people see, these higher level practitioners are just, their buddies, and they're working out, they're doing all the social media stuff and posting,
Right.
Their wins and whatnot. I don't think that, like you said, I don't think it's the end all be all. I think moving is more important than anything else. If you're moving, that's going to be the most beneficial to you, right, John? Like, I mean, you're getting up to that age now too, where you're like, look, dude, as long as I'm able to play with my kids or whatnot, like,
I just want to be active. I don't want
Yeah.
to be a couch potato. So as long as I'm moving and stuff like that, I feel like it's just better for you in the long term.
And not
sure.
that, at that top level, the guys that are competing, obviously doing an extra strength and conditioning program is going to help them, right?
Yeah.
But I've always been the mindset that if you want to get better at jiu-jitsu, do more jiu-jitsu.
Do jiu-jitsu. Yep.
So
what advice would you give to newer practitioners that might be starting a little bit later in life?
have fun. Nothing like earth shattering. Just come in and, we can use that cliche, drop your ego. And that takes some time, but just come in with an open mind and have fun. And I honestly think that learning jiu-jitsu is going to be the second best thing that on this journey. The first thing is meeting cool people and having a friends and family that you never expected,
Yeah, the camaraderie you get from martial arts is I don't know. To me, it's like it's hard to match, you know,
Yeah.
when you go through those adversities with people. And where else can you strangle your best friend and then have a beer afterwards?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's like no feelings or anything
That's how
like
it was
that.
in school, right? You get in a fight, and then you're best friends with the guy you get in the fight
Yeah,
with.
yeah, right. Like except for now, you get to do it regularly and in a controlled environment.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
So, but you live in Ohio, right?
Yeah.
What is up with the loyalty? Speaking of loyalty, what is up with the loyalty of people in Ohio for, you know, for everything that it comes from you guys? Like,
yeah. Sports teams, you mean? Like,
yeah,
Yeah, I was like, is that where he's going with there? You're talking about LeBron right now?
yeah,
Like,
well,
where
I
are you
mean,
going with this?
right, LeBron. People, when he left Cleveland the first time, right, they're like, no, burning his jersey
Oh,
like they
yeah.
did for Favre when he left Green Bay and went.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel that that kind of goes into your guys' jiu-jitsu also? Like, if you see someone from Cleveland or Ohio, you're like instantly like, yeah, that's my boy. I don't even care who he is. Like, I just know he's from Ohio. Like,
I would probably. I mean, I think we did that with Stipe when Stipe won the UFC title.
oh
right?
yeah.
You know, he's a Cleveland guy, and you know, people will say he kickstarted everything for Ohio because the Cavs won the next year, and then the Indians made the World Series, and you know, so yeah, Ohio is very, very loyal to their sports teams and people, just like in general. Yeah.
Yeah, do you feel that kind of in your academy too? Like, is that just a general vibe that you kind of get from your students?
I would say so. I've never thought about it that way, but you're right, man. Totally. That's a good point.
Yeah, I think we live in a small town too, where people have a little bit more loyalty also to the people around them.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak for like I didn't really train down in San Diego, but I feel like in a larger area with more people, there's probably less of that. Like I don't think
Probably.
California in certain areas is going to be like ride or die for their academy or anything like that. But I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, it could be. Did you feel it was like that when you trained down there, John?
Yeah, I mean, at the places I went, they seem pretty close knit.
Really?
Yeah.
I think it's maybe just the.
And I mean, it was word of mouth too. I'm like here, right? And I'm like, hey, where should I go train? And our professor at the time was like, hey, go to this place in Chula Vista. That's where I went. And then I went there, and they all knew him. I was like, you know,
And you're like,
they still got the ties.
what? Welcome to the Thunderdome. So, Chad, we usually like to end the episode with one tip for a brand new practitioner, someone that just started out. You kind of alluded to a little bit of it with the older practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything for just the general white belt just starting in jiu-jitsu that you would tip to them?
Probably the same thing, man. Just come in with an open mind, have fun, ask questions. You know, that's the biggest thing when I started doing seminars or, you know, taking seminars. I would always try to ask a question. And even in my classes, if one of my other guys is teaching, like when I was injured, you know, one of my purple belts is teaching, I would kind of come in the class and watch, but I would ask him a question, even if I knew the answer, because I knew somebody there probably had that question and didn't want to ask. Or, you know, obviously maybe they didn't even think of that question, but I think we don't talk about that enough, man. Have questions. You know, I want to be as approachable as I can be to the students where they don't think they can. And I'm not, but I think that probably happens somewhere or a lot of places where you get lost in the mix. Like, we have some big classes, like through the week, I have 30 to 40 people in every class.
Oh, wow.
But you see these guys, like I saw Tynan Dalpry posted his 6 a.m. class at AOJ had 90 people in it.
Holy crap.
I'm like, what the heck? So, you know, in those instances, how do you touch everybody, you know? Like, how do you get to those people? So
Diminishing returns, man.
yeah. So I think a lot of times it's got to be on you to seek some things out too, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. I wish I asked more questions when I first started, but everyone
I probably asked too many because they all look at me at the end of every time they teach something. They're like, anybody have questions?
Well, and you know what?
It's true. They were like, anyone have any questions?
John?
Yeah.
For sure.
And that, you know, that helps the instructor. You know, Terry that does the podcast with me, he's my question guy, and he'll make fun of himself, but he's asked me questions like, hey, why do you put your right hand there? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's reverse this and let me see, why do I do that? You know, some things I try to be so detailed, but you always like, well, why do I do that? So questions help the instructor as much as it helps the student.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
So, John, you got anything else?
I don't, man.
Hey,
Thank
Chad,
you.
this was a great conversation. Sorry for all the technical
No, I
difficulties,
apologize
man.
too, man.
No, it was still a great conversation. I can't wait for people to listen to this. Where can people find you if they want to listen to your podcast, look at your academy, and stalk you on the internet?
So Team East Coast _BJJ on Instagram is our academy page. You can find Limitless Radiocast on all major platforms and social media and stuff. And we also
Great
have
show too.
Yeah, we also have Limitless Tape as our finger tape. So check that out too.
Heck yeah, man. Thank you so much once again, Chad, for coming on the show. I'm glad we got to finally do this. We're all so busy all the freaking time with our day-to-day lives and our podcast too.
Yeah.
But it's good we got to sit down and have this conversation. So
For sure.
Remember, guys, follow us everywhere. Follow Chad everywhere. Go listen to Limitless Radiocast. And yeah, that's all I got. Remember, no old checks here.
Goose.
All right, guys. Thanks. Peace.